It's Eternity Sunday, a day when we remember and honor the dead and set our sights to what is out beyond the horizon of our temporal realm, when we look to eternity for a few moments on a Sunday. It's a practice specific enough to our own tradition that Eternity Sunday isn't recognized in the common lectionary, at least not yet. Maybe we can mount a lobby or something. But for now, the lectionary calls this Sunday the Reign of Christ, and it brings together a bunch of mostly Old Testament passages about kingship, especially the kingship of David. The whole thrust of the collection is very political, and in all honesty, I don't really have the stomach for more politics just yet, nor does it seem all that relevant to our candle ritual this morning. But there are moments of eternity even here. The 2 Samuel passage Martina read has David bragging that his own rule is like the sun rising on a cloudless morning, gleaming from the rain on the grassy land. And then he reminds us that God has made an everlasting covenant with him and his house. Everlasting. Psalm 132, also in the lectionary, clarifies that this covenant is God's oath to David that one of the sons of your body I will set on your throne, and if your sons hold fast to the decrees that I shall teach them, their sons also forevermore shall sit on your throne. These eternity-like words, forever or everlasting, from the Hebrew olam or adeh into Greek aionion, which then gets translated into Latin aeternum or aeternitas, where we get our word eternity. Those words crop up in every single lectionary passage this morning, except for the last one from the Gospel of John. It is there where Pilate asks if Jesus is the King of the Jews, the heir to this divine arrangement with David's house. Jesus replies that his kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom belonged to this world, my followers would be fighting to keep me from being handed over. And Pilate, hearing the word kingdom, replies, "So you are a king." And whether that's just a kind of gotcha or from genuinely trying to understand, it's always hard to know with Pilate. The whole lectionary ends with Jesus' response. "You say that I am a king, but for this I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice." This morning, let's just skip all that other stuff about kingship and sit with that wonderful line for a moment. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to the voice of Jesus. Just hearing that, not even really knowing exactly what it means, but just hearing it, I feel like my heart is falling back into the rhythm of the cosmos. We live in a world, if I may speak for all of us, and in very simplistic terms, where truth is often hard to grasp. We often get our news through social media, where the facts of the matter can easily get distorted, whether that's by accident or from some deliberate agenda. And even with more mainstream news outlets, it's hard to know when they're being overly partisan or focused on profit to the detriment of truth. With all these opposing voices out there, it's clear that we need way more resources channeled into education, and into giving our children the tools they need for critical thinking. And yet, our schools and universities are facing massive deficits, funding shortfalls, and hiring freezes. How do our kids find truth in the midst of all this, and not just get tossed to and fro by the vagaries of power? My heart rate's definitely going back up. It may seem a daunting task in this environment, but if we are called to be a people who belong to the truth, that advocacy for children and investment in education and critical thinking is not something we can just give up on, something we can retreat from into fantasy or easy certainties. Critical thinking is part of our Christian work, and as such, it is work to rejoice in and be grateful for we know it bears abundant fruit. Let's return to that line again. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice. So far, I've been talking about truth in an academic, kind of cerebral way, and I do believe that tools like critical thinking are helpful and necessary in listening to Christ's voice. But they aren't the whole story, because the truth he's talking about here isn't just philosophical or mathematical. A cornerstone of our faith is that Christ was fully incarnate. Some would say he was incarnate in an exemplary way. His motto wasn't to listen for truth with just your brain, but to love the Lord your God with all your mind and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your heart, and to love your neighbor as yourself, that is, as someone who is also all these different holistic things. So I'd like to turn now to say a bit about listening to truths of the heart. Not that I'm an expert here. After what feels like an eternitas in university, I feel like I'm at least comfortable with a lot of intellectual things. But when it comes to, shall we say, matters of the heart, and here I mean things like feelings or emotions, I feel like there is a lot of growth to be had. And I'm not sure if being married to a psychologist helps this or just makes me feel my inadequacy even more. Probably a bit of both. Basically, my experience is this. If Shoshana or someone else asks me, "How are you feeling today?" I initiate the process of introspection, turning inward to observe that heart at the center of my being, and what I experience and perceive there is usually a big fat nothing. And that's not necessarily to say that I don't feel anything, just that one, I usually don't know what it is I'm feeling, and two, that makes it kind of hard to explain what I'm feeling to someone else. It's as though as soon as I turn my attention or analysis to my feelings, I move out of my feeling heart and into my thinking brain and can't access them anymore, to be very dualistic about it. I've known and kind of joked about this condition for a while. Not that self-awareness has helped all that much. But then the other day, this article popped up in my feed, something called alexithymia. And right away, I shared it with Shosh and asked her jokingly and also seriously if that's what I have. I don't know if anyone else has heard of this. It's a condition where you really have trouble identifying, distinguishing, and expressing emotions. The literal translation of the Greek word is a, which means not or without, lexi, or words, and themia, or thumos, which means passion or emotion. So basically, no words for feelings. According to one website, it's estimated that 1 in 10 people have alexithymia, and it's even more common in those with depression and in autistic people. 1 in 5 autistic people have alexithymia. And those stats are just coming from a random site I found. So I'll leave it to your inner Jesus voice to tell you if they're true or not. In one of our workshops at my MCEC Tim retreat a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about having difficult conversations with people as a pastor and listening not just to the words that are spoken, but sometimes more importantly to the feelings that are behind those words and give rise to them. As part of that, this sheet was passed out. It's vocabulary of emotions or feelings, and I apologize if it's hard to read. Just know that for me, no matter how close this is to my face, it basically looks like Hebrew. Like, what are all these things? You can see that it's like that emotion wheel that we looked at for children's time, with some primary emotions on top, and then a whole series of nuanced gradations of these, from strong to medium to light. And for me, I've had a hard time even knowing which of these top bold categories that I'm feeling. But, you know, whether it's devastated or reeling or petrified or invalid, I've still got a lot of way to go before I can recognize and name those things. The good news is that there's hope, even for someone like me. Emotional awareness, I've been assured, is a skill that can be developed in adulthood and improved over time, whether it's through practicing paying attention and trying to name one's emotions, or you can learn to identify them by how they are represented in the body. There are lots of cues there that can be more easily perceived. With anger, for example, it's pretty easy to recognize when my voice gets really loud and my face gets all flushed and whatnot. But some of these, of course, are going to be a bit more complicated than anger. One feeling that is or has particular significance this morning, on this Eternity Sunday, is the feeling of grief. If we zoom in again here, we can see that grieved is listed as a strong form of depression. And that definitely makes sense. But on the other hand, as I learn more about grief in my own experience, the grief from losing my parents, for example, and I'm still only beginning to learn how that is manifesting in my body and in my spirit, but also as I learn from sitting and sharing stories with others about their own grief, from having those difficult conversations, I wonder if grief doesn't really fit into any of these categories. It's kind of its own category of emotion that cuts across all of these in ways that might be unique for each person. For me, I kind of went through this very quickly and thought, for me, grief has a bit of empty loneliness. It has anger as part of it. It's got a discarded feel of hurt. There's certainly confusion, a bit of terror, a bit of helplessness. There's feelings of care that come up, of course. And even in that category of happiness, probably not tickled pink, but down here there are some, like serene. My grief often feels very serene to me. So you all might feel a different mixture that comes up for you when you try to listen to yourselves and to your grief, and a different way of carrying it. But I'm not going to give any more examples of what that might look like, because I've already gone and done that thing where I get up into my brain and I'm overthinking everything with all these like cross categories and whatnot. I think my point here is that we can grow in our emotional awareness and our ability to express feelings, and we can grow also in our ability to listen to one another and share in each other's joys and each other's grief. As a church, we are the body of Christ. We are the ones who carry his emotions of hope and confidence and despair and forgiveness, and it's part of belonging to Christ that we listen for those truths in ourselves and in one another. Today, as we light candles for loved ones we have lost, we belong to each other's grief. And next week, we'll begin lighting candles for some other reasons. Good to be with you all in all of that. Amen.